It feels so much different to actually be in community with you and live here and not via a screen. And I just want to thank you so much for having me for the past 2 weeks. This has been a pleasure. And I'm excited to start this presentation. It's not going to be 60 million slides. I really want to hear from the people in this room and virtually their disability story, so we can share as a community what we've gone through and what we want the future for people with disabilities to look like. So I will just share my screen. So today's presentation will be disability policy and politics, and we're going to talk about inspiration and what it means to be an inspirational disabled person and how that can be both counterproductive and motivational. So I want to ask you guys in the chat and in this room, why do disabled people inspire you? And this is a free space, free of judgment. Yes, question one more time. Why do disabled people inspire you?
I would say their resilience is inspirational.
Let's see in the chat.
Somebody in the chat say we embody resilience.
Anyone else?
I think in terms like the creative possibility, sort of finding new ways of being in the world and doing things in the world that may look different than people with other body capacities, but it's creative.
I love that. One of the things about being disabled is the world is not fit for you. For example, I was supposed to be here yesterday. The world is inaccessible to disabled people. So for example, you know, the average able-bodied person can just request an Uber and go to the airport in their neighborhood. For me, it could take like days in advance planning to get assisted transportation. So it costs money. We call it the disability tax. And we call it finding innovative ways to work around a system that is built against your survival. And that works for you in the workplace because disabled people have innovative, creative ideas because our lives have been forced to be innovative and creative. But we're also going to challenge what inspiration really means. But in this context, we're going to talk about how able-bodied people often get off on imagery of disabled people in a way that's really toxic. So inspiration porn draws non-disabled people to a portal where they see people with disabilities as having achieved successes that might be surprising to others. You know, there's such low expectations of disabled people that if you see a person in a wheelchair get on a bus, you feel motivated and inspired. But if this person was to walk on a bus like an able-bodied person, or I wouldn't say able-bodied, but if you can't see their disability, if they just look normal, you wouldn't be inspired by that. So that's where the complexities of inspiration porn comes from. And we're gonna watch a brief video about it.
Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing. Capital B, capital T. It's a bad thing. And to live with disability makes you exceptional. It's not a bad thing, and it doesn't make you exceptional. And in the past few years, we've been able to propagate this lie even further via social media. You know, you may have seen images like this one. The only disability in life is a bad one. Your excuse is invalid, indeed. Or this one. Before you quit, try. Yeah. These are just a couple of examples, but there are a lot of these images out there. You know, you might have seen the one, the little girl with no hands, drawing a picture with a pencil held in her mouth. You might have seen a child running on carbon fibre prosthetic legs. And these images, you know, there are lots of them out there. They are what we call inspiration porn. And I use the term porn deliberately because they objectify one group of people for the benefit of another group of people. So in this case, we're objectifying disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. The purpose of these images is to inspire you, to motivate you, so that we can look at them and think, well, however bad my life is, it could be worse. I could be that person. But what if you are that person? I've lost count of the number of times that I've been approached by strangers wanting to tell me that they think I'm brave or inspirational. And this was long before my work had any kind of public profile. They were just kind of congratulating me for managing to get up in the morning and remember my own name. And it is objectifying. These images objectify disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. You know, they are there so that you can look at them and think that things aren't so bad for you, to put your worries into perspective. And life as a disabled person is actually somewhat difficult. We do overcome some things. But the things that we're overcoming are not the things that you think they are. They are not things to do with our bodies. I use the term disabled people quite deliberately because I subscribe to what's called the social model of disability, which tells us that we are more disabled by our bodies, the society that we live in rather, than by our bodies and our diagnoses. So I've lived in this body a long time. I'm quite fond of it. It does the things that I need it to do, and I've learnt to use it to the best of its capacity, just as you have. And that's the thing about those kids in those pictures as well. They're not doing anything out of the ordinary. They are just using their bodies to the best of their capacity. So is it really fair to objectify them in the way that we do, to share those images? People, when they say, you know, you're an inspiration, they mean it as a compliment. They mean it as a compliment. And I know why it happens. It's because of the lie. It's because we've been sold this lie that disability makes you exceptional. And it honestly doesn't. Disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. Thank you.
So what are your thoughts on what she said, that last part, a disability doesn't make you exceptional? Doesn't that turn the whole concept of inspirational disabled people on their head? Why do they inspire you? Because you couldn't imagine being them? And I think that's very important for us when we look at disabled people. Do you look at them as their equals, or do you look at them as portals of pity? And so that woman that you saw in that video, her name is Stella Young. And she was a writer and a comedian, and she didn't die as a result of her disability. She died talking about what she was going through, inaccessible worlds. She was literally on the curb and was hit by a car in her wheelchair. She died before her time. But her legacy lives on because young disabled people are challenging this notion that we need to be congratulated for having a job. We need to be congratulated for getting up and brushing our teeth in the morning and just existing. So we're gonna watch just a brief video, and then we're gonna talk about people who are comfortable in this room talking about disabilities if they are. You don't have to share. If it's silence, I'll share. And this is Annie Segarra. She's a woman of color, a disabled woman wheelchair user. And she's wearing this wonderful shirt that says, "My other disability, it's a bad attitude," because of that classic quote that the only disability in life is a bad attitude, which is a lie.
As though we are inspiring just for existing. Disabled people do not exist to inspire you. We are not here to be your Fitspo. We are not here to educate you. We are people living our own lives. We are not here to entertain you. We are not here for your consumption. We're not here to smile and motivate you. Our anger and our sadness is not to be responded to with, the only disability in life is a bad attitude, just because any disabled person that is anything but motivational makes you uncomfortable. Stella said it best. No amount of smiling has ever turned a staircase into a ramp. Inspiration porn includes stories about an able person asking a disabled person to prom, or an able person hires a disabled person, an able person assists a disabled person, etc. And it makes headlines. Sometimes one's actions are not necessarily inspiration porn, but the way that it's presented and spoken about is the inspiration porn. I'm all for visibility, true visibility, that tells the stories of the disabled. So, in stories like Daniel, who was recently hired by Starbucks, instead of praising the manager for looking beyond the disability, that story should have inspired the conversation about why it was so hard for Daniel to find a job, to find job opportunities as a young autistic man. How do we combat disability discrimination in the workplace? Listen to the stories of disabled people and their experiences. Get their side of the story. Don't take images and videos and put them online without their consent. Don't accept mediocre acts of kindness as newsworthy just because it was an able person being kind to a disabled person. We don't tell these kind of stories in any other circumstance. To ask ourselves, would this be a headline if it were an able-bodied person doing it? Are we getting the disabled person's perspective? Is this story created with the consent and approval of the disabled person? Is the story focused on the actions of the able-bodied person as admirable? And if they committed those actions to another able-bodied person, would it be a headline? But we have to be able to examine and acknowledge the loss of personhood in these stories. Like the story about the McDonald's employee that assisted a disabled man with feeding himself, who was then taken a picture of from behind, and the image spread throughout the internet, praising that employee as though he did some heroic deed, while having absolutely no consideration for the feelings of the man who was being assisted. Or the story about an autistic person who decorated a cake, and the customer was praised for not getting angry, even though the harm was done by putting that image online and spreading it around. How do you think that person who decorated the cake felt when the world was praising this woman? You're such a great, kind, patient person for not getting angry at that disabled person. How would you feel if you were in vulnerable positions like these and someone documented it without your consent and spread it all over the internet? How would it feel to know that no one cared about your thoughts or feelings or what you had to say on the matter? How would you feel at the confrontation that the world does not see you as an autonomous, fully fleshed, multifaceted, multidimensional human being, but a burden? Someone that only angels and saints and heroes have the patience for, that tolerate you, that are willing to put up with you, hire you, take you to prom. That's why these stories suck. That's why they are inspiration porn. We need to call it out when it happens, so reporters start feeling the pressure to tell stories about disabled people in an authentic way, to give them the agency to their stories.
So what are your thoughts on that? Isn't that, I mean, that would sound pretty radical if you weren't in the disabled community. But she said something that was really really powerful. You're taking a picture of a man who's being fed by a McDonald's employee who's disabled. And she said that's not heroic. And you took away his agency by putting that online. It counters all those beliefs that able-bodied people are saviors to disabled people.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if it wasn't, so if it was not documented, would that still be like, would it still be okay to praise the employee? Because I'm thinking that when the video was playing, I was thinking of like, the employee was helping a disabled person, same way many employees help like homeless people or people who are hungry and like give them free food too. I'm not saying it's the same thing, I'm just saying like in that scenario.
So I'm thinking those issues when they're not, when those are documented same way as this, is that, was that necessarily, was the issue that they were being fed and like they don't need to, or the issue was that it was documented without that?
I think there were two issues. One, we might not know if that disabled person needed somebody to feed them. I've had people take things out to try and serve me, or if I need help, I will ask. But people will try and take a plate out of my hand and say, what do you want? Oh, I got you, so they can feel like a hero. And so number two, what do we consider like heroic or praiseworthy? If you see somebody struggling and you feed them, you know, maybe, I mean, I think what the person was saying was challenge the notion that being a good person is something you need to be praised for. And to be honest, it is just being a decent human being.
Yeah.
And so as someone, I'll give you an example. As someone who, I mean, I had to start dressing a certain way when I became a wheelchair user because I was in college wearing baggy sweats and someone handed me money on the street. I'm the one with the Coach bag and you feel like you need to give me money. And I have a colleague who is a wheelchair user, and this white couple actually tried to stop and pay for his groceries. He has a PhD now. He's all like, I'm not going to be your good deed of the day. Back away from me. So those are just food for thought. Any other questions? Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have some thoughts about restaurants and other places that you need to walk into for a good and a service, listing accessibility as a bonus feature. And I know that some of these things are impacted by like what state we're in as well, or even what city in that state. Because like, you know, we have Yelp and Google that lists, and it's just like bonus features, you know, accessibility. And is there even like a universal set of expectations for accessibility besides like we might have a rank?
Yes. I mean, there are a lot of resources online that will list what you need to be an accessible restaurant. Like, for example, do you have a barcode for your menu? Is your menu online so someone can, and can a blind person use a screen reader to read it so they can come to the restaurant knowing what they have? For example, there's an accessible, well-known restaurant in DC. They claim to be accessible, but they don't have a button that you can press to get in. And to perform at that place as a poet, no ramp, but they're still considered accessible. So, I mean, there's a laundry list of things that would be needed to be accessible. Like places with loud music, I can't take my friends with hearing aids there. I can't take my friends who are hard of hearing there. So there's a list. Yeah, it's out there. And it shouldn't be a bonus feature because there are 40+ million disabled people. It's a law. It shouldn't be a bonus feature. It is the law. Any questions in the chat?
No.
Oh. All right, let's move on. Try and be as quick as possible. Sorry.
There's one question.
Oh, sure.
I'll read out loud.
Sure.
In the video, she asked, why are we talking about how generous the employer is for hiring this autistic person instead of why this disabled person couldn't find a job in the first place? I work at a disability rights advocacy nonprofit, and we run up against the employment discrimination issues a lot. A lot of funders only want to support trainings for disabled people to learn skills that employers want, as opposed to training for employers about how to not discriminate against disabled applicants. That was a great question. I mean, I don't think that was a question. I think it was just a statement.
Necessary statement. Very necessary.
As though.
So, as we said, this is Developmental Disability Awareness Month. And this is a child with Down syndrome. And you see exactly what the previous speaker said, Annie Segura. Sometimes angels are disguised as kids with special needs to teach us how to be better people. Why do you need, there's no such thing as a special needs child. This child is disabled. Special needs is something that cheats you out of the rights that you want, to avoid saying disabled as if it's a dirty word. But why is a child an indicator for you to treat people better? This is ridiculous. And so how we stop this is by calling these names out, not sharing them, and challenging ourselves to think we need to see people as humanly as possible and not as vessels for pity. So there's this wonderful book out called My Disabled Stories by Omar Loban. And so I wanted to ask, is anyone in the room or anyone on the chat comfortable with sharing their disability story? Meaning, how did you, anything. It could be, how did you become disabled? How did you come to accept yourself as a disabled person?
So I have severe scoliosis. It's degenerative. I now sometimes I have to use a wheelchair, especially in an airport, because it's just that's just too much. The bags, the walking, I can't stand for that long. And it's been this sort of process of losing capacity over time is a journey. I mean, I don't know anybody else's experience, but it definitely feels like a different experience than starting from a place of not having the same abilities as I guess the majority of people. And it's honestly, I really had to come to terms with the wheelchair usage thing, but I kind of utilize it as a protest now. Like I like how uncomfortable people feel when I'm zipping around the airport, and sometimes I really kind of get dirty looks from older people, and I feel like, well, you should have got a chair because this is helping me, and I'm not sure why if you're struggling. So I just have the attitude of I need to do whatever I need to do to be comfortable as I move around the world. And that's what made me think of the creative thing too, because there's things that I can't do that I used to be able to do, and I have to find the adjust. I have this walker thing too, that I walk around the barn.
So I was born with multiple disabilities, and all of those were physical. And so they were visible, but nobody described me as disabled. I was kind of the medical model, and the doctors were able to, quote, fix me. They were able to help me walk again or walk like they never thought I would. And they were able to remove the extra teeth in my mouth. And I was fixed. But I was later diagnosed with autism or pervasive developmental disorder, which is often related to a lot of medical and linked disabilities. But I think one of the things that was difficult about it was that being a part of the medical model, everyone wants to fix me and they don't want to fix the society around me. And that happened with my parents too, who rejected me and who I was, and wanted me to get fixed by the doctors, wanted me to be a different person. And I think that we need to really consider that medical model as something that is broken. We're not able to be, it's not a cure. Disability doesn't need a cure. Disability needs understanding. Disability needs value. Disability needs more voices.
And adjusting to, I wouldn't call them limitations, but changes in your disability and being comfortable with asking for help. I have friends who didn't know that they could get services for people to help cook for them that their insurance would cover. Personal care attendants, they continue to struggle out of this. I'm doing it, I'm gonna be just like the able bodies. I used to be just like that. And then I decided to accept my disability and get a wheelchair. And there are so many benefits of it aside from me not having to constantly be exhausted, but it even reshaped my body. Like I was like, I finally have like curves, like you know what I mean. My friend who used to use a walker, he was chronically underweight his whole life, and he decided to give up his parents toxic ableist viewpoints and become a manual wheelchair user, and he finally put on weight, and he's in the gay men's course in DC, and now he has a doctorate. Like, you creating more limitations on yourself is, it's not healthy. Do we just have any questions in general about disability justice, disability rights, disability identity?
Yes, there's a question in the chat. The question was, I'm curious about your thoughts about disabled people being inspiration for other disabled people. Is this different from inspiration porn?
Oh, it's very different. I have disabled colleagues that I admire, and it's because of the work that they do. And and the fact that they try and mentor and bring other disabled people in. Like in my area in DC, we have a whole collective of Black disabled women. I don't know where that exists anywhere else. And they've been in high positions in like the Obama administration, the Biden administration.
I wasn't able to come to the other two sessions, so you might have already spoken to this, but you just made me think of the issue of intersectionality in relationship to, what I experience in my body, the intersecting identities of identifying as Black and queer and female and disabled, but an invisible disability, and navigating spaces with all these things happening at the same time is very, very challenging. I'm just curious if you could speak to something related to that in terms of disability justice and that kind of stuff.
There is disability studies, field of academic study, and then there is a set called Black ableism, and you can Google it, and it does include Black disabled scholars describing the Black disabled experience. And it's a unique experience that is very much different from white disabled people, because you got this triple-headed monster. The young lady we saw speak, Annie Severa, she's Puerto Rican color. So there's so much information out there, intersectional Black disabled world experience.
Mm.
It's available to you, not Black.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can I ask it from the Zoom?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, cool. I was hoping, or I was wondering if you could speak a little more to something you said earlier. You were talking about the term special needs. I don't remember exactly what you said. If maybe you could repeat yourself, but what I received was that you were like, oh, this term isn't really like doing anything for us, slash isn't a thing. Is that true?
In my humble opinion, I look at the creators of the phrase special needs, and they aren't disabled people. If you called somebody special in an argument, you know it's an insult. We've been encouraged not to identify as disabled. There's an entire set of laws for us and civil rights protections. The less you identify as disabled, the less access to rights and programs. There aren't special needs programs out there for adults. I've done disability internship programs, disability fellowships. Until we accept, and there's an entire disability pride movement. We have marches all in different cities all over the country. So special needs, in my opinion, is a non-existent reality for people who don't want to accept that their children are disabled and want everybody to be in denial. I was in denial for years. I've had a health issue since I was 9 years old. I did not want to be disabled. That was not a label. It took me a smooth decade and a half to have my come to Jesus moment. But I'm not saying everyone has to think this way. We all have our terms that we prefer.
Word. Thank you.
Maybe like who or how you had that come to Jesus moment of like really moving towards yourself and towards like self-determination and yeah, like who were the folks that helped you, like who were the folks that supported you?
I'll say this for anyone who is maybe even in school, or even, I don't know if there's an age limit on this program, but I did a program called the AAPD internship program. It's only for disabled people. They housed about maybe 10 to 15 disabled people in a like dormitory style. and they would place us in different internships in DC. And they would have speakers who had disabilities, and they would pair you with a mentor who had a disability. I did the program because I needed funding for an internship. And then they started teaching you about disability history. And the person that made the biggest impact on my life was I saw a woman named Claudia Gordon speak at the White House. Obama made an effort, as controversial as a politician as he is, he made an effort to have disability advisors. 2 of them were Black. One of them was the first Black disabled woman attorney in the United States. She was also a model. She went to Howard University. She spoke at the White House. I was interning there. I was like, I can finish college now. She went to law school as a deaf woman. I don't know if anyone here has been to law school, but it's a lot of group work, and you don't always have an interpreter. At Howard University, they tried to say that she, as a student, had to pay for her own interpreters, even though under the law, the school is required to. That inspired her to go to law school, and I said, I have a role model now. And then, I don't know where this came from, but we like just stuck together. Like, she introduced me to somebody, and I found this person. I was like, oh my God, it's like a little Black disabled girl mafia out here. And it's a benefit of living in DC. And I encourage everyone, social media is a way to connect with these people. Imani Barbara, Melissa Thompson. I would just follow anyone who has a disability on social media who's doing the work and connect with them. They respond to messages, they want to know you. All right, we're gonna just try. Any other questions?
Other sessions in the Black community, and you're African, right?
Yeah, I'm Nigerian.
So just like the Nigerian community, being African, just how your experience with ableism and disability has been in that sense.
I can't go to church. Church is a place of trauma for me. I was 9 years old when I had a heart condition. I was being taken from church to church and being told I had a demon of illness inside me that needed to come out. And my health kept progressively getting worse and worse. I ended up having a heart and kidney transplant in middle school. And even as an adult, I can't go into church without having somebody try and pray over my legs. The look of pity. And there's a unique, Black ableism is real. There's a unique way in which we encourage Black people to hide their disabilities, never speak of it, never go public, don't even do advocacy, because you have, being Black and that experience of racism, to be held against you. It is what it is. My career choice is not something my parents or I don't think any African person I know would endorse. I'm Nigerian. Why would you want to do disability rights? Why would you be proud to be disabled? I'm like, the hell that I've gone through on this earth? No. And even the religiosity in terms of Black Christianity, I mean, even when I'm at like subway station and someone's posted up and they're like, God loves you. And I'm like, I didn't think he did. And what are you talking about? Like, why are we even having this conversation? Why are you trying to pray over me? What don't you understand that God made disabled people in his image? And you're hurting people. And I won't say this about every church, but the Black church specifically telling people not to get therapy, specifically telling people to take their kids out of special ed. You don't want your kid to be different. Denying that ADHD or ADD or autism is real, anti-vax. We are the most vulnerable when it comes to these diseases. COVID literally gutted the community and made thousands of Black children orphans. And we are still susceptible to that propaganda that vaccines cause autism. You would rather have your child, like I know one of my roommates was post-polio. She was from Ethiopia. She was younger than me. How am I meeting someone who is post-polio in the 2000s or in 2010s? How is that happening? Because we don't know the gift of vaccinations. My roommate is foreign. My roommate was foreign. She was born in Ethiopia, acquired polio when she was 3. You would rather your child acquire polio or measles or never be able to travel abroad. These communicable diseases cause disabilities. Your child could go deaf as a result of not being vaccinated. So why are you doing this? I know we don't have much time left. Just a few images and graphics. Super Crip syndrome. I don't I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but looking at disabled people, you see this hero with a cane up these steps. And, we're tokenized. A disabled person is seen as overcoming their disability. You can't overcome anything. You learn to adjust. So this stereotype needs to die. And so sometimes disabled people are often tokenized, and we're supposed to be the spokesperson for the entire community. I can never be that, and I never try to be. Pity porn. Disabled children are often used to profit off of, it's the same nonprofit industrial complex, where you are using an image of a child for charity and making money off of it, and none of it is going to these disabled children. It's let's contribute money for the cure. Autism Speaks is considered a hate group amongst the autistic community. They're not working to train or, advance the autistic community in the sense of access to civil rights, access to education. They are just collecting money, and it's corrupt. Anyone in here young enough, I would say old enough to remember the MDA telethon, or the Jerry Lewis, it was 21 hours, Labor Day. This man is a crook. He is just full of shit. His MDA telethons raised $2.5 billion since 1966, and only 30% of his telethon money went to charity. This is how he really felt about disabled people. My kids cannot go, he would call them Jerry's kids. My kids can't go to the workplace. There's nothing they can do. He even referred to them as cripples. You guys can read the quotes for yourselves. So these are how his kids were used, or kids with muscular dystrophy were used for advertisement campaigns. And the majority of people in this country with muscular dystrophy are adults. Once you stop being cute and grow up and become Jerry's adults, you are abandoned. They were used. So Jerry's orphans, a bunch of disabled people who used to be Jerry's kids, rebelled against him. Jerry Lewis. I'm sorry. No. Oh, it's okay. He's a comedian and actor from way back. So they protested. They say, I'm a former Jerry's kid, not a pity. It's not a pity party. We don't need the cure. I don't say this to other people, but if an organization is looking for the cure, they're not looking to advance the lives of disabled people, because cures are almost 1 in a million. They've allegedly found a cure to sickle cell, but the treatment is $2 million. Who's going to be able to pay for that? Not the Black people who need it. This is how the man truly felt. He actually said if he had ALS, he put a gun to his head. I don't want to get into too many of the quotes, but when disabled people rebelled against him, he called them leashes. He's like, there's only 19 of them, F them. He didn't care about them at all. He didn't want to be challenged. This is him in Parade magazine in an article he wrote. I realize that my life is half, so I must learn to do things halfway. I just have to learn to be good at being half of a person. And that was what he wrote in an article entitled, If I Had Muscular Dystrophy. Speaks for itself, exploitation. Short video on him.
Portraying them as objects of pity, reinforcing stereotypes of the disabled as helpless and childlike. Jerry's orphans in detail for the first time. They say Lewis succeeds by portraying them as objects of pity, reinforcing stereotypes of the disabled as helpless and childlike. Jerry's orphans in detail for the first time.
They've got a problem. I hope that they get better.
Well, how can you say that? How
can I say it? Listen again. They have a problem. I hope they get better.
But these people have this disease and they say you're making them feel childlike.
I feel terrible about that. It's a shame. But while I'm playing to 100 million people that think what I'm doing's okay, I can't worry about or dignify 20, 30 people. I can't. I haven't got the time for that.
And I promise you, I'll fly to Chicago and we'll knock down some pins. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
A month later, Lewis kept his promise and says Adam beat him by 10 pins.
I'd like you to know, my friend, that he's still alive 1 year since that date. And the mother and the father say, you came to bowl with him, and he's going to stay alive for you.
Lewis compares it to the famous story about Babe Ruth hitting a home run for a sick boy that kept him alive.
He did it! It's a home run!
You know what did it for him? Hero worship. That child survived by hero worship. Babe Ruth made him walk, okay?
Oh my God, are you kidding? He actually said that.
The arrogance of him to assume that he's a hero, to those of us in our condition, the very idea that he would assume that we needed A, heroes, B, that he would be the hero that we would choose, it's just beyond my comprehension.
And they are now turning on you and calling themselves Jerry's orphans. Forget the issues. Personally, what does that do to you?
Why didn't they call us anything when we bought them the wheelchairs, Chris? Why wasn't I a terrible man when we bought them the wheelchairs that are getting them around?
Lewis wrote about cripples and said if he had MD, he'd have to learn how to be half a person. You call them half a person.
We talked about the corruption behind the scenes, that he wasn't really raising money for anything. And just know, be cautious with the organizations that you donate to. I would say, here are some things, how you can change things. Contribute directly to disabled people. Mutual aid all the time on disability people trying to raise money to survive. You know, support and donate to organizations that are disability-led. Do your independent research. Don't share bullshit memes about disability. And you have a right to call it out, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. There was a recent viral video of an entire family knowing sign language because of a deaf relative. And in any other context, knowing how to speak to your grandma is not a skill that you should be praised for. It's basic. So we've done Q&A. So long and farewell, even though, yes.
Lisa, do you want to unmute and say what you said in the chat?
Sure. I just wanted to say that there is an underrepresentation of Black disabled individuals in leadership and in employment. There's underrepresentation in media and in television. But there's overrepresentation of BIPOC or Black individual persons of color, disabled individuals in education and in prisons. You, Ryan, everyone in the audience, you are not too loud. You're not even loud enough. Your voice matters. You have a community and you belong.
That was so personal. I want to thank you all for having me. This is so long and farewell, but I will always be available. If any resources you need, I'm here. I got you. You're welcome to contact me on any of these mediums.